What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And this one I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers, and break down what's going on with the news affecting the markets, what you should be watching for on the charts. But before I begin things out, what's going on with the market during this pre-market session, let me just mention a couple of things. Firstly, I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo with the link down below and deposit $100 into the account, you are guaranteed up to 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed up to 15 free stocks. The offer ends very soon. Anyways, looking at SPY, I want to break down some very important levels for you guys, then talk about how the charts are looking in just a couple of minutes. But first, let me just go over the news and the data that just came out this morning. So, when it comes to data, as a reminder, at 10 o'clock a.m., we have the CB lending index month over month coming out. Watch for volatility at that time. We're going to be watching to see how close this is to our consensus of a drop by 0.3%. So I'll be watching that. Watch for volatility at 10 a.m., 30 minutes after market open. And then at 11:30 a.m., we have the 3-month and the 6-month bill auctions coming out. Watch for volatility at that time as well. So we'll see what happens during those times. Be prepared when the data comes out. As far as earnings go, we just had the Bank of Hawaii this morning, very, very minor, nothing too crazy. And then after market close, we have United, Logitech, and just a couple of others. We'll be watching those very carefully as well. For a couple of things affecting the markets, we're at all-time highs on the S&P 500. The market is still trying to hold up, but don't forget that the recession is still on the table, and I wouldn't necessarily be way too bullish forever. I would want to be very careful looking at the markets, especially because there is still a risk for a rejection coming soon. I'll be talking more about that later on, and for now, we'll just be watching some key levels for the markets. On top of this is also reviewing some earnings. Don't forget, we have Tesla, IBM, and etc. for Wednesday. It's going to be the most important earnings day of the week. On Tuesday, we just have like Netflix and a few others, but don't forget about all of those. Going back, there's some new news about some changes in politics. Macy's rejected a $5.8 billion acquisition proposal from Ark House Management and its partner, Brigade Capital Management. That is a big change that happened, especially after they announced the fact that it's going to be cutting 3.5% of its workforce, or about 2,300 jobs. So more job cuts are being announced by these companies, from Macy's to Google, and the list is going on. So this is very important. With them closing a lot of their, with them closing 5 stores, we'll see what happens to them for now. But there are some economic hardships that are still affecting these companies. On top of this, there's been some news about the murky future of Sports Illustrated. That is very important as well, as they're laying off most of the publication's staff. The cuts have come after they failed to pay the licensing fees to its owner. So that's a big change that has happened to them as well. So something worth noting. Now let's just talk about the market, how on earth are the charts and such looking. So right now, and one of the things I said yesterday is that SPY looked like it was bullish. It could pump a lot more, right, when we looked at the technicals. But I just want to mention to everyone that looking at SPY on the smaller time frames, we've actually gotten very close to this key resistance. And you want to be very careful right here, because SPY now has resistance which is starting to fight. So SPY gapped up and it broke 483. My target would have been like 485. We came just under that, 484.4 ish. So be very careful in this 484.4 to 485 range, because this is acting as some tight resistance. So we're going to be watching to see, can SPY break above 485 and hold there. If it manages to achieve that, you're going to be watching and push all the way up to 486 plus, right? If we do end up breaking that resistance. If we fail to do so, we could be coming back down towards our gap. There is a gap below, so you just want to be very, very careful right here. So this is going to be our resistance zone right here. We have this new resistance zone that's being developed. So if we're bullish, you want to see it break 485, push up to 486 plus, and 487.5 will be our next target up here if we're bullish. If we're bearish, you want to see SPY basically lose 483. If we lose that, we have a gap to fill all the way down to the 482s. And if we lose that, our next target will be 481.36. All right. So what do I think SPY is going to do? Honestly, guys, it depends on how we open once all the data comes out, because we're kind of fighting right now. We're fighting very close to 485. We'll see if this thing kind of pushes through that or rejects. If we do get that rejection, I'm going to be watching this gap. We have a big gap below right here. So I'm going to be watching this. This might actually turn right here. I think I've seen this play potentially play out many times. There's this gap below, so you want to be careful. You might get a rejection, some profit taking here. I said yesterday the market may pump more. SPY did pump more during the pre-market. It's going to gap up higher, but watch and see if we come back down to fill this gap, and watch the support very carefully. There's a risk of that happening for what I'm seeing thus far. What about for Tesla? How is Tesla looking? Well, unfortunately, guys, I have bad news for Tesla. So Tesla had a lot of bad news. We had price cuts from big analysts. We also had some negative news that came out involving some deals with Tesla. It has come back down to fill its gap, but it's barely holding the 50 EMA and this 212 area. So I think it's very important to watch how Tesla reacts to that, because all this bad news is still trumping how it was looking. Now, I mentioned to everyone that Tesla could pump approaching its earnings. I still hold that view, but it depends on if Tesla could hold this support or not. So watch 212 as key support on Tesla. This has turned a little bit to fill its gap. If we hold 212, we do have potential to bounce back up to 214. We have to try to get back above 214 and eventually 216 to resist some balance for this thing to turn back to bullish. You want to get back above those levels. For bearish, you have to lose 212, and then we have this level that's going to be very key. 208 to 210 is where we saw a lot of chop. If we lose the low we made here, we turn back to bearish. You want to be very careful on Tesla. This looks like a nice accumulation. It still looks like it could rebound, though. I'm not necessarily switching views unless the bad news trumps this and ends up losing 208. So as long as Tesla holds above 208 specifically, there is still potential for it to bounce. If we lose 208, we turn a lot more bearish. Okay. What do I think it's going to do? I think it's going to try to fight to hold 212. Could drop a little bit more and then might attempt to bounce, chop around a bit. But I still see potential for this to actually bounce, because this could be looking like some kind of cup and handle like formation. So I still see potential in a Wyckoff accumulation. And I still think there's a good chance it may attempt to push approaching its earnings. It's great from a it looks better from a technical standpoint, but the only issue with Tesla is the fact that we keep getting so much bad news. Like, we'll look at technicals. Technicals could show it's getting ready to bounce. It tries to bounce in the morning, then all this bad news comes out, which slows it down. So that's the only thing that's really tricky for it. But like I said before, it might, drop a bit more, find a bottom, and then try to rebound a bit and start pushing back up. There's potential for it to do so long as it holds its key supports. Technically speaking, it does look like it has a nice, potential uptrend that could be forming, but the only issue I have with Tesla is the fact that there's just so much bad news. You just be a little bit careful with it. So watch and see if we get a bounce at those levels or not. The QQQ is in a very critical place, because this looks like I said yesterday it might pump a little bit more. I was correct. Okay, I was correct. It did pump more in the pre-market. The QQQ is currently at it just touched 425 almost, and now it's starting to reject. We have a big gap below at 422. So, for us to be bullish, you want to see this break 424.8, then 425. If we break 425, we do have potential to get up to 427 later on if we're bullish. If we're bearish, you want to see it come back down and basically lose 423. If we lose that, there's a gap to fill at 422, and then we could start sinking back down to the 420s. Considering how much we pumped without getting a rejection, we are gapping up again. So that means there was remaining momentum as I predicted, but it's looking like it's kind of starting to turn here. That's what it's looking like to me. It's starting to turn. In my opinion, it looks like it's going to come back down to fill the gap. So I might see a little retracement on the QQQ. Could retrace a few points, but watch support. So I'm anticipating a small move to the downside. It might actually retest 422, and I think we might see a small sell-off, some profit taking and such. So I'm anticipating a little bit of a drop on the QQQ. So that's looking very probable for the morning. So watch this gap below. It might come back down to fill that gap. On Nvda, I was talking about 600 that's coming. We actually reached 600 to a T, and then I said above 600 we have 602. So you can see it's chopping around 600 to 602, but be a little bit careful. If we break out, so there's a pattern on Nvidia I noticed. Basically, all you need to know is that if we push up higher, we have to try to break 600 and then 602. If we break above 602, our next target is 605, 607, and 610 on Nvidia. Those are three levels that are just worth mentioning. I know people may have been thinking that Nvidia has so much free room to run up to like 615, 620. But the problem is, look at how it ran today, right? It pushed up to 602 and now it's trying to reject. So that's why you want to pay attention to all those levels. If we reject on Nvidia, you want to see it lose 597. If it loses that, we're coming all the way back down to the 594s. If we lose that, so there's 592, then 590 coming next. It pushed nicely, but it is fighting resistance at 602 to 600. It is just below 600. This looks a little bit stronger than SPY and the others, so watch and see how it holds here. This is going to be key for the stock. It might come back down to fill this gap, so be a little bit careful. I predicted the market would push up higher. We did push up in the pre-market. We're gapping up to those levels. Now the market might turn once we end up getting an open. So be a little bit careful with Nvidia. There's a risk of it coming back down, but watch resistance just to be safe. It's not looking as weak as the QQQ, so just be a little careful. On Apple pushed up to fill its gap. It actually filled its gap. Okay, we filled this previous gap up here, and also we came very close to forming this nice George W, right? The nice double bottom, but we didn't make it to the full measure and move top. It might retrace a bit before we reach the top, so there's a chance that the market may sink a little bit because Apple's holding 192. If we lose that, there's a gap to fill all the way down at 191.3. If we're bullish, you want to see it bounce and break 192.5. If that breaks, our next target is 193.5. But we look like we're turning here, so we might see a slight retracement back down to the lower 490s, not the 490s, excuse me, the 190s. There might be a little retracement coming just temporarily. We could bounce later, but Apple looks like it might cool off a bit since it pumps so much. So be a little bit careful, guys. We're seeing some signs of the market potentially slowing down. We might gap up. We're going to gap up when we open, most likely, but then the market could turn after that. So, did we pump more? Yes. I mean, the move wasn't done yet. The market may gap up, but there's a risk that many of these stocks may cool off a bit. So, be very careful, watch your supports, do what you have to do, guys. I will most definitely see you guys in the next one. Thank you for listening, and peace out.